Good evening. I'm Richard Waller, Executive Director of the University Museums at the University of Richmond. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for the opening of our new exhibition, 17th Century Dutch Landscapes, Museum Studies Seminar Exhibition, on view in the Joel and Lila Harnett Museum of Art. Organized by the University of Richmond Museums and part of the Tucker Boatwright Festival of Literature and the Arts, this year's festival is hosted by the Department of Art and Art History in collaboration with the University Museums. The exhibition was curated and developed by students enrolled in the Museum Studies Seminar. The exhibition and programs are made possible in part with funding from the university's Cultural Affairs Committee, the Dean's Office of the School of Arts and Sciences, and the Lewis S. Booth Arts Fund. Our thanks go to the lenders to the exhibition, including the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, to Frank Razor, and to Carol and Jim Goodfriend. It's been exciting for the seminar to work on making the exhibition a reality. Special thanks and appreciation to Dr. Mitchell Merling, Paul Mellon, Curator and Head of the Department of European Art at the Virginia Museum. Not only was he instrumental in the loan of several of the works in the exhibition, he has worked closely with the Museum Studies class, meeting with the students both at the Virginia Museum and here at the university, assisting at various stages in the development of the exhibition. And Dr. Merling enthusiastically agreed to participate in our opening program tonight at the invitation of the Museum Studies class. In addition to the students that are on the panel here on stage, I would like to acknowledge all the students in the seminar. The class was divided into 3 teams. On the curatorial team, if you could stand the class, that'd be great. On the curatorial team are Kelsey Barrett, Selena Barrios Pietri, Ellie Iverson here on stage, and Jenny Kakani. On the education and interpretation team, Andrew Olmstead here on stage and Paige Schaefer. And on the marketing team, Clara Axner, Catherine Pierce, Sarah Restivo, and Allison Siegel also on stage. A round of applause for our team. They will all be in the exhibition after our program, and you can talk individually with the students. Following the program, please join us for the reception and to see the Dutch Landscapes exhibition. To start the panel discussion, Paige Schaefer from the class will introduce Dr. Merling. Thank you.
Mitchell Merling is the Paul Mellon Curator and the head of the Department of European Art at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, where he has served for the past 10 years. He holds a BA from Vassar College and a PhD from Brown University, where his dissertation topic concerned Venetian 17th century art theory. He has held numerous fellowships from the National Gallery of Art, from where he went to his first job at the Montreal Museum of Art. Dr. Merling was born in Montreal and is proud of having worked at the museum where he had his first experiences of art, namely the Hermitage version of Caravaggio's Lute Player and contemporary artist Jean Dubuffet's Painted Cage at age 7. Before coming to Richmond, he was the curator of the Art Museum at the Ringling Museum of Art, which preserves the only monumental painting cycle by Rubens outside of a European palace. He is the author, most recently, of Catching Sight, The World of British Sporting Print, published by the VMFA, and of Capricci and Landscapes by Francesco Guardi, published in Italian by the Museo Corre, Venice. Dr. Merling now has 2 exhibitions running concurrently at the VMFA: Van Gogh, Manet, Matisse, The Art of the Flower, and Félix Bracmont, Impressionist Innovator, selections from the Frank Razor collection. One more thing. He is very much looking forward to collaborating on the VMFA Intercollegiate Undergraduate Museum Studies Seminar to be co-taught with Professor Waller in the fall, which will result in a spring 2016 exhibition, curated by the students, to be held here at the Harnett Museum of Art entitled The French Horse, From Jericho to Picasso.
So I meant to kick this off, but first I'd like to say a word of thanks to the students for inviting me. Thank you, Paige, for introducing me. Thank you, Richard, for your gracious words. I mean, we collaborate a lot, and we have a really good relationship, and I really look forward to our collaboration on the course. And this is a good dry run for it. I think you know, our few meetings with the students produced a really fun product. So, you know, maybe I think the students really deserve to be commended because Dutch landscape is a very specific topic. It's much studied. And it's not really necessarily such an easy topic. I mean, it looks easy, I'll say that. It is easy to like, but it's not always so easy to understand. It's considered to be very accessible, and I mean, I guess it's meant to be accessible, but it often has deeper meanings that we'll get into, I think, as we talk about the exhibition. So the exhibition is about Dutch landscape, obviously, and it consists mainly of prints, but there is one painting in the show, a painting from the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, and it is Solomon van Rostel's, one of his great paintings and one of our great treasures, and we're very proud to have it live here for a while. What's it called? A river landscape. So it's great painting and just so very Dutch, you know. It's the essence of all that's Dutch. I won't talk about it very long, but I think that you can really see in this landscape the concern of the Dutch in the 17th century to represent. And it is not so obvious that in a world dominated by representations of gods, saints, heroes, kings, that a river with some trees and a ferry boat could be a subject worthy of art. And I think that realization is a great thing and a noble thing and an exciting thing. So that's all I'll say by way of introduction, and I'll turn it over to Ellie, who's going to take us on a walk from a walled town, and we're going to walk from a walled town to the very outer reaches of the imagination.
Yes, so this is a view of Haarlem devastated by siege and fire by William Akerslot.
Very good.
Pronunciations.
I told you it wasn't easy.
Not easy. So I actually did my research on this one, and this was the very beginning of the 80 Years' War. It obviously depicts the devastation of the Spanish when they intruded upon Haarlem. The siege lasted a really long time, so I believe, and the Haarlem citizens were there till the bitter end. So I believe that this would depict the strength of the Dutch people, and they would want to show exactly how ruthless the Spanish were and how strong the Dutch could be. And it also starts off our little story that we tell throughout the exhibition in the town. So the town was a really central part of Dutch life. There was a lot of pride in their town. This is where their life centered around. That leads to the next one, Rolfman. He's mostly known for landscapes without structures and buildings, actually. But his earlier pieces, he did do a series with structures. And this goes, again, to show how important town life was to the Dutch. After this 80 Years' War, there was more money, a little bit more money, more pride for who they are and where they came from. So they wanted to show that in their art. This is another one that's hung with the townscapes. Right as you go in, it's going to be on your left. We have the Ackersloot by itself, and then we double hung the two Ruffmans. So you see them isolated. You know that you're looking at townscapes. Allison.
Sure, and kind of narrowing our view in from the town into kind of these towerscapes, I guess we'll call them. We have this first piece is by Jean van de Velde, and it's the landscape with tower of the Het Hoesterskloof near Haarlem. And in this piece, you can really see the balance between both nature and the town, with the tower standing right next to a large tree. And as you can see, this is kind of an early piece. This is the early 17th century, so everything in this is very simple. There's not too much detail, there's not too much shading, and the image is pretty flat, which if you go onto the next piece that we have, which is one of the two Rembrandt pieces that we are very proud to be showing off tonight. This landscape with a square tower is actually a capriccio, which is a combination of both real pieces of Dutch landscape and imaginary. So Rembrandt was able to take the most important aspects of both natural landscape and townscape and combine them in this piece to show something with tremendous detail, with depth, with shadowing, and really give a nice full depiction of Dutch values during this time. So the third piece hung with these kind of towerscapes is by, let me get the Esaias van de Velde, which is landscape with a river and a gatehouse. This is not the same Van de Velde, though they are related, and this goes to show, again, with the riverscape and the tower, we show the balance between both the man-made and the natural in Dutch art. We want to move on.
I think it's back to me. So we're talking about Jan and Esaias van de Velde were cousins, I believe. And here we see, I'll just run through them very quickly, 4 times a day. And these are charming prints. I think they're among the highlight. And I don't know where they come in really in terms of our walk, but because, well, we're getting close, farther away from the city. Here's the landscape. This represents evening. And it shows the Good Samaritan, but mostly it's normal, everyday people. Here, there are some people looking at the moon, and I'm going to plug an exhibition that we're going to have at VMFA in the fall called Nightfall, Prints of the Dark Hours, which is exactly about the subject of this print, which is the representation of night in prints. And night is a great subject for the printmaker because printmakers work with light and dark. And I know that's something that the labels really the very well-written labels in the exhibition go into in great depth, the techniques that the printmakers use. They're forced to work with light and dark as their medium, and we'll see it exploited to spectacular effect. But what really interests me in this series of prints, and I'll just go back through them. Here's twilight.
That's evening.
Evening. Twilight is the same thing. This is midday, and that's dawn. It's that there are people and bridges and little towers and the varieties of types of landscape. And the idea of the 4 times of day is a very a good way to structure a series of landscapes, and one is really meant to experience them like the people in the landscape are teaching us to experience the landscape with them. Now I'm just going to talk about something very different from people. Thank you. But it's very typical of the Dutch to try and think of things in terms of types, right? So the next type of thing is?
The next type of thing is the animal prints. This one, The Wandering Herd by Gerrit Blecker. Well, the Dutch had recently gotten out from under the Spanish And in this new period, they were experiencing an age of prosperity. And animals, such as these herds, which were incredibly important to their economy and their livelihood, represented this prosperity. This is further reflected in Paulus Potter's cowherd, and he popularized the animal print genre in Dutch art. He specialized in it: cows, sheep, horses, and this work exemplifies a incredible attention to detail that he was known for.
Okay, absolutely.
So then we switch and we go to our forescapes, which are actually my favorite in the exhibition. The way we hung them was really interesting, thanks to Mitchell. They're in a cluster almost, but because we talked about it, and before Mitchell came, it was all a little bit confusing. And then he came and helped us kind of sort everything out. So the way we did the forest is that it's kind of stacked and clustered all together. The Jacob van Rousdael is probably one of the most significant pieces in the forescapes, just because he was so well known in the second part of the 17th century. A lot of the other artists actually in this cluster of forescapes looked to him for skill sets and for just inspiration, I guess. And I really think that this is an interesting piece because you do see the contrast with the light and the dark. It's so detailed. You can see the leaves and the stems. I believe the verboom is next. This one it's much lighter, obviously. The verboom also, he was known to, I believe he also looked at the Roosdael.
Yeah.
And I think he's pretty much known for looking to him and using his skill set.
Yeah, but what interests me, I guess, could I interject a comment?
Please.
Yeah, well, what interests me about these different things that we've seen so far is that how emphatic the artists are in telling you what you're looking at. You know, if you're looking at the Paulus Potter, there's a cow, it's a cow. If you want to go back to the Great Beach, the Great Beach is a tree. And, the thing is that, we're on this steady journey walking out from the town, and all of a sudden we're in the forest, and that's why we kind of threw them up on the wall, and we're kind of in the forest, kind of ecstatically looking at all these different trees that are kind of placed hither and yon on the wall in this crazy pattern. So there's no order to it, and we're just meant to enjoy nature, which is not really such an ordered experience. You don't experience nature in such an ordered way. You just kind of seize on one thing kind of randomly. So we put the prints in a kind of random way on the wall.
Yes.
Well, there's a word for it. We call it a cloud or something like that. What do we call it, Richard? A cluster. Yeah, okay. So there are about 5 of them all clustered together.
There are 5.
And Waterloo is great.
This is my favorite one in the whole exhibit, other than the painting, which I also love. I think this is just so beautifully, like the dark and the light is so contrasted. If you look closely, you can see 2 figures and a dog, and they're growing into the forest. And I think this really exemplifies Dutch pride of their landscape and their surroundings. I think it's really, really nice. We have 2 Waterloos. This is the other. And then we have the Rooster.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Right.
So next we're kind of moving into the mythological pieces, which we were talking earlier and just learning from Mitchell why these were so important in Dutch landscape art. And the reason why these artists were experimenting with these mythological scenes was to show their ability to kind of work with the classics the way that the Italians would, and to compete with them and show that they were just as talented and that their art was just as worthy of all of the praise that the Italians were getting during this time. So the first piece that we have is the Swanveld, the landscape with Pan and Syrinx, and just to kind of let you know what's going on, the adventure of Pan and Syrinx. Pan was trying to seduce this forest nymph, Syrinx, but she did not want to be seduced. So as she's running away, she comes upon the river and she asks the river god to help her. So his way of helping her was to turn her into a reed on the side of the river. And when Pan came up and he thought he saw her, all of a sudden she turns into a reed. So when he reached out to grab her, all he got were these plants on the side of the river, which was obviously very disappointing to him. But that is kind of where we get the Pan pipe from, or that's where they say it comes from. So he was able to turn this forest nymph that he had been chasing after into his kind of little musical instrument that he kept on his side. And this piece is trying to depict the middle of that struggle. So I really love the way that there's so much depth, and the shading, like Mitchell had said earlier, they really show you what to look at, because the contrast of the light and the dark really draws your eye to certain spaces within the etching, and I think that that's just brilliant and well done on their part. So our next mythological scene is Apollo and Coronis by De Pass, and this is kind of a story of jealousy. We have Coronis in the foreground laying out on this kind of like lounging position, and we have Apollo behind picking herbs from beside her, and in the background you can see a funeral being set up, which is interesting because this is actually a warning against jealousy. That's what the inscriptions at the bottom are talking about. So you can really see the way that the Dutch artists of the Golden Age were trying to show their range and their skill in comparison to the Italians at this time.
Continuing on from the mythological scenes, we now come to religious scenes. And also, along with the story we're trying to tell, not only are we continuing away from more daily images of life, but we're also going into nocturnal scenes. So as the title would imply, this shows Joseph and Mary fleeing into Egypt with baby Jesus. And this inscription below actually reads partly, "The light of the world fleeing into darkness." And this is shown perfectly because Henrik Gout actually uses shading to create the illusion of light in the unmarked areas of the page. And so you can see cradled in Mary's arms, baby Jesus, contrasted sharply against the dark surroundings of the work. And next is another Rembrandt, and it's the angel appearing before the shepherds who flee before him. And, so this work also shows a great contrast of light and dark, with the light concentrated in the upper left with the angel, and the figures of the angel and the shepherds and their animals only take up a very small portion of the work. And there's a great contrast between the size of the various figures in the work and also the high drama that it represents.
Yeah, well, I guess, like, for me, I mean, this is a very dramatic ending to the exhibition, and nature appears to be animate. You know, all of a sudden the angel is appearing, and the trees are blowing away, and the cows are running away, and the shepherds are running away. And if you look closely at the print, you can see the townscape so I guess you come kind of full circle back to the town. But I just want to commend you. I think you can all hear from the comments that the students made how it's not so easy, and I think we've shown some of the elements of Dutch landscape painting that aren't so obvious. You need to know a lot about Dutch history. You need to know the artists, some of whom are quite unfamiliar even to specialists. You need to know a lot about technique, and I think the students have all demonstrated a good knowledge of technique and formal analysis, as well as just insight, which is basic factor. So let me throw it out. How did you learn all this so fast? Because now we're going to talk for 15 minutes about learning about art and talking about art, right?
Right.
And we're going to have a little discussion about the process, and and then we'll open it up for questions, right? For another 15 minutes. So that's the plan. I hope you all find it interesting, because that's the plan.
I think the curation group learned the most about our pieces when we met to do our introduction panel and our printmaking panel. That's when I learned the most. We talked about etching versus engraving. We talked about our individual pieces and writing the extended labels. I think that's when you really figure out, and before that we had seen all the pieces, not hung, but laid out. Mm-hmm. So we were able to kind of connect everyone's pieces together a little bit. We knew who was related to who, and who was in the earlier part of the 17th century and who was in the later part. And I think that's kind of when we started pulling things together.
Yeah, and I think that the curating team wasn't the only group that was able to do some research and kind of get in and learn about the art. Everyone in our class was required to look at least 2 pieces and kind of do some research on it. So even if you weren't doing all of the label making and putting everything together, you did get a good sense of at least 1 to 2 pieces that you could kind of connect with the exhibit, which I thought was really nice.
My experience was pretty much the same. Yeah, you learn so much just in a very short time, reading about the artist and reading about the work. And it really opened up this whole new world of so many artists who were many of them related to one another. Everyone seemed to have a father or relative
Right.
who was also an artist.
Yeah, well, they were traits, right?
Yes. And so the education group, we, of course, education and interpretation, we also wanted to help viewers to look deeper into the work. And so one of the things we did is we've worked on this I Spy game, which will allow people to look deeper into it and pick out details that they might not have otherwise paid attention to.
Yeah, well, I hope you're going to include the cows running away in your I Spy game, right? Because they're great. So count the cows or something like that. Listen, I want to say for me, the moment really happens when you put the works on the wall and you have the labels on the wall and the room is lit and you walk into your own exhibition for the first time, and there it is, all hanging together, interpreted, but you never experience it the same way. You're still learning about it, and when you go into your own exhibition and you see it hanging on the wall and you read your own labels, you learn a lot. You learn a lot. That's when you really learn. That's when it really comes home for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, what else should we talk about?
What was that? Sorry.
You have questions for me, right?
Yes. So my question would be just, being that you worked on this whole exhibition with us, what is your favorite piece?
Okay, the Rembrandt. Well, I mean, I bought the Rembrandt, so that was a fun day, because I bought a Rembrandt and a Dürer on the same day, so I felt pretty good about myself. That was great experience, and when you bring something into a collection, that is also one of the great things about being a curator, is bringing something into a collection. But this piece was never hung on the wall of the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, so it's making its debut here. And I should say that you're now a partner of the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, which is a program that we have statewide, and you're just down the road, but we're partners anyways. So that's a great thing for you to be. And well, my favorite piece in the exhibition, I gotta admit, I have a big fondness for Paul's Potter. You all know that I like that because it's so, but I like them all. Gee, I don't know. What's your favorite, Allison? Come on.
My favorite is the Plank Bridge by Waterloo.
Uh-huh.
I wrote one of my research papers about this piece, and kind of similar to what Ellie was saying about the first Waterloo, I just think that he does such a good job of showing just how enormous the Dutch landscape is in comparison to the Dutch people, and putting these tiny figures in these enormous forests just really puts it into perspective. In this piece you can see there's two men.
Show with the pointer.
How do I do
How does
that?
that work?
Oh,
Yeah,
there we go.
there you go.
Okay,
And show
so
the bridge.
over here, this is the bridge down here, the tiny man-made structure. And then you have these two men sitting on the side of the road. And just looking at that in comparison to like this kind of natural bridge in the fallen tree over here and these huge trees on the side, I just think that he does a good job of putting the two into perspective and showing what's important in Dutch values.
And where do you think that came from, Allison?
Where do I think it came from? I mean, I think it was just themes that people were toying with during this time, and I think that Waterloo kind of honed in on this, and kind of the idea of the sublime that was popular during this time.
Yeah, the sublime. But it's
So-
not the Italianate sublime.
No.
It's the natural sublime,
Right.
right?
I think it also came from the pride they had after the 80 Years War with the Spanish.
Right.
I think they were really happy or proud that they had come through that, and they could show that their landscape was so beautiful and everything about Dutch culture was just so beautiful.
Well, big trees means that they've lived a long time, the trees, right?
Yeah.
So they've lived a long, that's nature is really old. The Dutch nature is old and has survived. So I think that is also very awe-inspiring. And it's something that, where you see it a lot is in American Hudson River School painting, right? And the idea of America and I think you could see that in the sister exhibition in the gallery, A Sense of Place. There's some American works that, embody that. There's, and also the Benjamin Williams Leader painting also embodies some of the same values for England, and of course, Leader was, anyways, let's not go there. So, Ellie, what's your favorite?
Well, I talked about it earlier, but my favorite was definitely the other Waterloo. I also love that there was a dog in it, because there aren't many dogs in these, and I think it's so cute that he did that. I also, like Allison said, I love that the trees are so encompassing of the landscape, and I think it's also very typical of Dutch landscape in that the horizon line is so low, and the clouds, I think it's really nice.
And look how far you can see into the distance.
Yes.
Right? And I love they're like little peasants. What are they? With the dog.
And there's another little figure that I didn't even see before that's back here. And I think that's really fascinating.
You're really supposed to, the way that you're supposed to approach these landscape prints, I really think you're supposed to look at them. You're not supposed to look at them and just walk away. You're supposed to walk into them with your mind and walk around in them. So please do that.
There's so many small details that you don't pick up on
Yeah.
at first glance.
Yeah, you're supposed to take a walk with those people who are telling you, take a walk with us, right? And it's all set up for that. So Andrew, what's your favorite?
My favorite would probably have to be the Ruined Tower by Van de Velde, because I actually decided to read more about that. And where is it? I learned that it was actually destroyed during the Siege of Haarlem in the 80 Years' War. The Spanish had used it as a headquarters during their siege, and it was left in ruins by the time the siege was over. The people of Haarlem actually used the rubble from its ruins to help rebuild and expand their city. So I think that it helps to show their kind of reconstruction after such a conflict, and also the sacrifice that was needed in order to make it through. So it's definitely a very solemn scene.
So it's like a classical rune too. It's their version of a classical rune, but it's a recent one that was made, you know. So it's a sign of their greatness, the way a Roman rune is a sign of Roman greatness, maybe? I don't know.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Were you overwhelmed when you walked into the gallery the first time and all the pieces were everywhere?
You mean?
When you came to help us in class?
Look, you know, I wasn't overwhelmed. I was, you know, so the story is that Richard kindly and the students kindly invited me to come and help with the installation. And I've installed a lot of shows, and you had a certain rationale for what you were doing. It was not very dramatic. So, you know, I tried to help you find your way. And at first I think you know, you didn't like what I had to say very much, which was my role. I mean, you know, because I had to kind of, you know, sometimes you have to turn things upside down, and you have to say, there's another way to do this, there's another way to do this. And how many times did we do it over? We did it over 10 times at least, right?
A lot of times.
Till we got to the final product. And by about the second or third, maybe by the third time, I would say, by the third time, you were all really excited, you were all talking, you were all saying, let's do it this way, no, let's do it that way, and let's do it another way. And I was really gratified because that was the kind of dialogue that I wanted to get going, where you all had a lot of ideas and you were all very excited about them. And that was the process that I wanted to see happen, and it happens. And then you weren't mad at me anymore, you were focused on the art.
I wouldn't say that we were ever mad at you.
No.
I think we needed the help.
I think, well, you know, like, I gotta say, you know, when you're working with students, you're students, right? You're not experienced curators, you're students. And so, you know, you have to be taught the process, and that was my way of helping you gain some insight into the process by having you experience the process. So, you know, and I think, you know, Richard, Professor Waller, because I want you to know who I'm talking about, right? So Professor Waller, Professor Waller has been very good at, you know, I mean, I was shocked to find that, do you know, so these students, their exhibition is 25% of their grade for the museum studies class. And I read the syllabus very carefully. And I think it's just a tremendous amount of work, you know, and the quality of the product is so very, very high, and it's just you've done an amazing job, and I really think you're to be commended for it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So it's 6:45 exactly. Should we do 15 minutes of questions from the floor and maybe direct them to the students? Yeah, always.
Oh,
I know some of those people.
They're your plants.
I was just wondering, I went to the Brick Rat Museum in Amsterdam many years ago, and I saw a press that he actually built to do his prints with, and it was amazing. Just the desire to do that was amazing. So, did you all study that at all, or talk about it at all in the exhibit about how the artists maybe did some of the work?
We didn't talk about Rembrandt specifically in his printing press, but we do have a section of the exhibit that's dedicated to the process. So we have a little panel about etching versus engraving, and we have tools that were laid out magically. I don't know how they got there. I was really happy. But yeah, we talk about the process, but not specifically Rembrandt and his printing press. That's very interesting.
But it brings out a very, very interesting point, which is that Rembrandt thought that prints, even though Rembrandt, needed money all the time and, could have gotten a lot of money for painting one painting, he chose to make prints. And I mean, even though he got a lot of money for his prints too, we know, the 100 guilder print, right? He chose to work in the medium of prints, which everything's always very complicated, right? But so have you thought a lot about prints as a medium? Because you walk in, there's this painting and then there are these prints. So what do you think about the differences between, or what do you think about prints generally? Have you thought about the special nature of prints at all? Like as multiples, as a means of mass communication, as an affordable art form, as a special kind of bearer of messages that are especially suited to bearing certain kinds of messages. Yeah.
We did not talk a lot about this, but what we did talk about, and I think comes across in the way that each of us spoke about the pieces, was just the difference between a print and a painting and kind of being able to see the artist's thought process as they're doing this. And you can see where they've paid extra attention to. And while you can do that with a painting, it's a lot more difficult to see each brush stroke in a painting as opposed to with an etching or with an engraving. With prints, you get to see every little move that the artist made. And I think that that's something special about these pieces of work, that you get to see, how much time they spent just to make that one branch, or, putting that small figure in the back of the Waterloo that you didn't notice until now. Those are all details that you get to see the amount of time that the artist put into it.
Yeah, I would say there's another way of putting your observation, which is that one has a more personal experience of a print than one does of a painting. A painting, like the Rousdale, has a more public address. It speaks to you from 20 feet away, and it can speak to 20 people at a time. Whereas a print, you have to go up to, and you have to have a one-on-one experience with it. So there's that difference too.
I think it's also more of a personal experience because it enables more people to have a personal experience, since you can't easily do duplicates. But there is a problem in that I know authorship is kind of an issue with prints. I know that a lot of pieces were credited to Anthony Waterloo because he would get the plates and tweak them.
Yeah, well, that's the business of prints. So, sometimes, the plates were sold to publishers and the publishers owned the plates, and then they did what they wanted with them. And yeah, we'll spend another semester on that problem. It's a subject for another exhibition, but you're very, very right. So let's take another question from the audience. Yes, sir. Could you please repeat the question?
Were these prints all framed before the exhibition, or were they framed before?
That's a good question for Professor Waller. Especially for the exhibition.
Talk about seeing the prints before.
Sure. Andrew, do you want to talk about that? Seeing the prints before.
Seeing the prints before. Seeing the prints before, I know in class we looked at them all together and out of the frame, and it was really quite something to be able to get that close to the work, and also without it being behind any glass or any kind of covering. It just made the experience, I don't know, so much more rich. You could get closer and see the details that much more clearly, I felt.
Were the works pre-selected, or did you select the works?
Pre-selected.
Pre-selected. So that's also, because you had to kind of make, sense of somebody else's selection, right?
And we did the same thing at the Virginia Museum.
They
What
were
do you mean?
unframed.
They came to us framed. Oh, we looked at them unframed, and we looked at a whole bunch of stuff, all different kinds of things. We looked at the Dürer too, and that's, of course.
Well, and that's kind of the beauty of being in a class like this. You get to do those kind of behind the scenes type things where not everyone is going to be able to see these prints without the glass and without the frame and getting as close as they want to it. And we all were lucky enough to have that experience both in the classroom here and, like Mitchell said, at the VMFA. So I know that's something that we all appreciated a lot.
Yes?
Who did the framing?
Dr. Waller?
Yes. Not us.
Museum staff, our museum curators.
Will they be stored in their frames from now on? Or will they be stored in the way prints usually?
They'll be kept in their bags.
They go back, because the frames get reused for other exhibitions, so mats come in standard sizes, and, so the frames are in standard sizes, so they go back into their boxes and the frames are reused. Otherwise, there would be piles of frames this high, and we need another building, and nobody would like Dr. Waller anymore. Right. So I know some of the students came prepared with questions, right? Is that true? Yeah, Clara?
Does your program, about the program,
Hi, Lee.
does your program deal with the context within which, the social context, economic context, within which these pictures are produced? I mean, young gentleman made reference to the Spanish occupation
Right.
and its impact. But for that whole 17th century, the Dutch War, it was terrible for them.
Right.
Ultimately, the French invaded, they had to open the dikes and flood the land. But that's
Right.
not reflected in any of these pictures at all.
Yeah.
Peaceful and
Yeah, they wanted to project that facade of peace and prosperity. The reality is not always.
they're very idealistic.
Yeah.
The Netherlands is flat and boring.
Right.
These etchings show these hills and
Right.
hills of trees.
Right.
So I'm just curious as to whether or not the program sort of looks at the contrast between, what's produced and what actually exists.
I think it's acknowledged, Lee. But have you seen the exhibition yet?
Not yet.
Oh, okay. I think you'll see that there's more complexity than we were able to lay out in our short discussion. Yeah. Margaret, where's your question? Nope. Okay.
I have a question in terms of the circulation of images and the making of the images. So in this period, then the images are made until the plate runs out, until it.
Yeah, well, when the plate runs down.
This notion of limited edition is a fairly recent.
Yeah, I think it begins in the 19th century when they start numbering editions, and they run the plates pretty hard and they get faint, and Well, I'll just, say that I hope the Rembrandt that we lent to the exhibition can stand. Oh no! Now I've done it. Okay, but we want to go to the. In the Rembrandt that we lent to the exhibition, I'm going to do what I was told explicitly not to do. You can see the middle tones and the chiaroscuro. The blacks are very black and the whites are very white, and the middle tones have a certain degree of crispness to it. You can appreciate the details, and if you look at the town in particular, the town is, why don't I use the pointer? Here's the town over here, and you can see all the details of it. And that's how you can tell that the plate has not been worn down. So, it's a lifetime impression of Rembrandt's plate. And Rembrandt's plates were very highly valued and printed in the 18th century. And so I invite you all to appreciate a good impression, and also the impression of the hout is beautiful. The blacks and the clarity of it, because it's not really absolutely clear that a dark print like this you can see every single detail in, and so it's an extremely beautiful impression, as most of the some of the Goyas in the landscape exhibition. You all have a very, very fine print collection here, and we are acquiring a very fine print collection. So we enjoy our mutual print connoisseurship relationship. So I think we have time for one more question. Yes? Sure. What, any question is good, yeah?
I was just curious, so several times you guys mentioned that the Dutch are proud, and that's how come we portray these overwhelming images, and the fact that prints can be reprinted several times. So I was curious if you guys had any insight about the role of the choice of using print as a medium and the Dutch's own pride, and if those two things could be related, if they decided to print them or make them treat them as prints so that they could kind of display it in one place.
Oh boy, so that's a really good question. That's such a hard question. I guess, I think, does anybody want to contribute to that? Yeah.
Oh, I just think
Take a stab at it.
I just think that because they were so prideful, they wanted to share all of these paintings or not paintings, drawings and etchings with the people, the Dutch people, and that's why they were printed and easily distributed.
I think there's a certain role of community building going on. There's a certain social function that these prints have in establishing a sense of identity and community. This is our common, I think Andrew said it very well, about the house on the cliff. This is our identity, right? Their identity, I mean. This is our community, this is our heritage, so I think that's certainly one of the roles, and I think that prints accomplish it very, very well, and I think it comes across very clearly in this very well thought out and, dare I say, well installed exhibition. So thank you very much for coming tonight.